Okay, I will start our class today by just welcoming all of you guys. Sawadee Khap, Sawadee Khap. Welcome to Wat Tung. Today is what we call our Pali Canon and English study group. This is where we study the original words of the Buddha. We start with meditation, and then after the meditation, we study the original teachings of the Buddha. It's more like a study group where other courses and retreats and classes that I teach, it's more me teaching, and then the students asking questions based on what I'm sharing. Where this program is more about studying the original words of the Buddha. I display the chapters of a book on the screen, and then a student will usually volunteer to read those chapters. And then I'll teach for about 5 or 10 minutes on each individual chapter, and then open up to any questions that you guys might have. As I mentioned, we start our class with meditation. So what I can do is guide you guys in meditation to help you get started. And then afterwards, we can transition over towards studying the original words of the Buddha. So if you'd like to join for meditation, usually we do that in the seated, lying, standing, or walking position. These are 4 different positions to meditate in. You guys are all sitting on the floor. So if you'd like to make yourself comfortable, usually what we do is we just cross our legs lightly, and you would like to keep the legs so that they're not real tight so that you can get circulation in your legs. Some people like to put multiple cushions under their rear because that gets the hips up in the air and that lessens the angles at your hips, your knees, and your ankles and allows the circulation to flow. The hands and the arms, the Buddha put his right hand over his left with his thumbs together, and he put this into his lap. If this is comfortable for you, you could use this, but there's other options as well. You could put your palms on your thighs, you could put them on the knees, you could put your palms up. It's really up to you. The important thing is that the lower body and the hands and arms are comfortable and relaxed. The upper body should be erect. By keeping the upper body erect, this keeps the mind attentive and alert during the meditation so that you can actively train the mind. What I'm going to do to get started is I'm going to do some chanting in order to ease the mind into meditation. There's nothing mystical or magical about the chanting. It's not prayer or worship or any kind of thing like that. It's just to help ease the mind into meditation. During the lifetime of the Buddha, they used chanting in order to commit the teachings to memory, and this helped them to memorize the teachings over the course of the Buddha's life because he taught orally. But nowadays, we don't need to chant in order to remember the teachings because we have books, we have videos, we have podcasts, we have things like this that can capture the teachings. But we still do chanting in order to ease the mind into meditation and ease the mind out of meditation. After the chanting, I will provide some guidance, some instruction on meditating once we're in the meditation itself. We'll all be in meditation with our eyes closed, and I'll just be providing some guidance to help you understand how to meditate. Then there'll be a period of time where it'll just be completely quiet, where we'll all be meditating together. So during that time frame, we'll just all be doing the work of meditating. Then after we are done meditating, we'll do some more chanting to ease out of the meditation, and then we can talk from there about the teachings of the Buddha. So if you'd like to make yourself comfortable, we even have the chants over on the table on a laminated sheet. You're welcome to see the chants that we use for the chanting if you'd like to see those, because it's in the Pali language, and it also has the English translations on that sheet as well. Arahang Samma Sambuddho Mahakeva Wat Tung Mahakevanhang Apivateyami Savakhato Mahakevata Dhammo Dhammang Namasami Supatipano Mahakavato Sāvaka Saṅkho Saṅghang Namami. นะโมตัสสะภะคะวะโตอะระหะโตสัมมาสัมพุทธัสสะนะโมตัสสะภะคะวะโตอะระหะโตสัมมาสัมพุทธัสสะนะโมตัสสะภะคะวะโตอะระหะโตสัมมาสัมพุทธัสสะอิติปิโสมหะคะวะอะระหังสัมมาสัมพุทโธวิชาจารณังสัมมุโนสกขาโตโรกาวิตุอนุเตโรปุริสาดามาสติสัตตาตาวามนุสนังพุทโธภควาติ Okay, with the lower body and the hands and arms relaxed, and the upper body erect, just close the eyes and start breathing in through the nose and out through the nose. Here you're just looking to establish the breath, a nice, natural, steady, consistent breath. Not forced or controlled, just a gradual inhale through the nose, experiencing the full breath. Breathing in and out. Breathing in and out. Your breath may not match up with the guidance that I'm providing, and that's okay. This is your practice. I'm just here for guidance, just reminding you that whenever you get to the next inhale, breathe in gradually through the nose, experiencing the full breath. And whenever you're ready, exhale out through the nose. Breathing in and out. Breathing in and out. With the breath well established, start fixating the mind on the breath, either the sound of the breath coming into the nose or the sensation of air moving over the skin. The breath is the present moment. Fixate the mind on the breath, the present moment. Breathing in and out. Breathing in and out. With the mind fixated on the breath, whenever you notice that it moves off the breath, cut that off, let it go, and come back to the breath, the present moment. No need to observe the thought, label it, judge it, analyze it, or even try to figure out where it's coming from. Just wherever you notice that the mind is moved off the breath, cut that off, let it go, and come back to the breath, the present moment. Breathing in and out. Breathing in and out. I'm going to be quiet now and let you do this work of focusing on the breath, cutting off and letting go anytime the mind moves off the breath. You have nowhere to go. There's nothing to do. No one needs you right now. This is your time to focus on the breath. Breathing in and out. อะระหังสัมมาสัมพุทโธมหะคะวาโอตังมหาคะวันหังอภิวาเทมิสวากขาโตมหาคะวตาธัมโมธัมมังนามัสสามิสุปฏิปันโนมหาคะวะโตสาวกสังโฆสังฆังนามามินะโมตัสสะภะคะวะโตอะระหะโตสัมมาสัมพุทธัสสะนะโมตัสสะภะคะวะโตอะระหะโตสัมมาสัมพุทธัสสะนะโมตัสสะภะคะวะโตอะระหะโตสัมมาสัมพุทธัสสะอิติปิโสมหะคะวะอะระหังสัมมาสัมพุทโธวิชาจารณังสัมมุโนสัคขะโตโรกาวิโตอนุเตโรปุริสานามาสติสัตตาตาวามนุสนังโอโตภะคะวะติ Okay, if you guys would like to make your way out of meditation. So this form of meditation is called breathing mindfulness meditation. This is the primary form of meditation that the Buddha used in order to move his mind to enlightenment. The mind that is enlightened, it's peaceful, it's calm, serene, and content with joy. You'll no longer experience any anger, frustration, irritation, annoyance, guilt, shame, fear, boredom, loneliness, shyness, resentment, jealousy. All the discontent feelings in the mind are completely eliminated. Even the slightest displeasure is eliminated from the mind as you train the mind. You can get to the point where the mind is always in a good mood. It's never in a bad mood any longer. That the mind has been so well trained that it no longer bases its inner feelings on some condition in the world, that now in the unenlightened state, your mind, you might experience sadness or irritation or these other discontent feelings, but you can actually train your mind on the path to enlightenment to eliminate those discontent feelings where the mind's always in a good mood because you've eliminated the conditions that are causing it to continue to experience the bad mood, for example. There are certain pollutions that the Buddha discovered in the unenlightened mind that you can use the training on the path to enlightenment to eliminate those pollutions. And when you eliminate those pollutions of mind, this is where the mind then experiences the brightness and radiance, the joy of the enlightened mind. Do you guys have any questions on meditation? Anything that we did during our meditation session? No? Okay, let me check online here. Okay, looks like we don't have any questions online. I see Poon wishing all of you guys well. We have a student from China who is usually here, but he's back in China now. He's wishing everybody a good day, that he said he was meditating with all of us. So, okay, what I'll do then is I'm going to switch over to the Pali Canon and English study group where we study the words of the Buddha. What I do is I have this, these books. There's a 13 book series, and we have one program called the Group Learning Program that goes through volume 1. Volume 1 is a foundational program or a foundational book that helps you to lay down a really good, strong foundation of the teachings of the Buddha and building up your practice towards the attainment of enlightenment. And then we also use that book for various courses, various retreats and things that we have as well. And then we have this program, which is called the Pali Canon and English Study Group. The Pali Canon is the original source teachings of the Buddha. They're in 45 large books about this big, and this book series has consolidated it down to 13 books. And in this program of the Pali Canon and English Study Group, we study volumes 2 through 13. And now we're in volume 8, chapters 11 through 20. And what we usually do is we have students will read the individual chapter. The chapters are sometimes just one paragraph or one page. We will have someone read it who volunteers using the microphone here, or those of you guys in Zoom, you're welcome to read a chapter as well. And then after somebody reads it, then I will share some teachings on that and then open up to any questions that you guys might have. This isn't typically where someone will start learning their path to enlightenment through a class like this. This is more of something that students kind of move into after they build a really strong foundation in the foundational teachings of the Buddha. But you can surely learn as you learn with the words of the Buddha. You will surely learn. Just understand that there's a more kind of traditional way of learning where a teacher is teaching and teaching and teaching, and then we open up to questions, where this is more of a study group where we're kind of studying together. So if there's someone here that would like to read this first chapter, you're welcome to volunteer. As I mentioned, we have the microphones there. If you could just use those, that way the people online will be able to hear the chapter as you're reading it. Is there someone that would like to read this first chapter? Okay.
The foremost, the best, the distinguished, the supreme, and the finest householder. Householder, the one enjoying sensual pleasures, who seeks wealth righteously without violence and makes himself joyful and pleased, and shares it and does meritorious deeds and uses that wealth without being tied to it, obsessed with it and blinding absorbed in it, seeing the danger in it and understanding the escape. He may be praised on 4 grounds. The first ground on which he may be praised is that he seeks wealth righteously without violence. The second ground on which he may be praised is that he makes himself joyful and pleased. The third ground on which he may be praised is that he shares the wealth and does meritorious deeds. The fourth ground on which he may be praised is that he uses that wealth without being tied to it, obsessed with it, and blindly absorbed in it, seeing the danger in it and understanding the escape. This person who enjoys sensual pleasures may be praised on these 4 grounds. This householder is the foremost, the best, the distinguished, the supreme, and the finest kind of person who enjoys sensual pleasures. Just as from a cow comes milk, from milk curd, from curd butter, from butter ghee, and from ghee comes cream of ghee, which is reckoned and the foremost of all this. So too, this kind of person who enjoys sensual pleasures is the foremost, the best, the distinguished, the supreme, and the finest of all those who seek wealth righteously without violence, and having obtained it, makes himself joyful and pleased, and shares the wealth, and does meritorious deeds, and uses the wealth without being tied to it, obsessed with it, and blindly absorbed in it, seeing the danger in it, and understanding the escape.
Okay, thank you, Koshi. So the Buddhist teachings are guidance to help you understand how to train the mind. They're not rules or commandments. He's not telling you what you should or shouldn't do. He attained this peaceful mental state, this joyful mental state of enlightenment. And he spent the last 45 years of his life, from the age of 35 to 80, sharing with people how he actually attained this mental state. And then there's ordained practitioners, and then there's household practitioners. And by understanding the training that he used in order to train his mind to eliminate these pollutions, an individual can then choose to train their own mind and eliminate the pollutions from their mind. And you see the truth for yourself that the teachings are working to improve the condition of your mind and the condition of your life. So here, this particular book is a collection of teachings that is guiding household practitioners in developing their practice. And during the lifetime of the Buddha, household practitioners had a very challenging time to get to enlightenment because they were so busy just using their time and effort and energy just to be able to sustain their life. They had to carry water from one place to another, multiple trips back and forth. They had to spend a lot of time planting crops, maintaining crops, harvesting crops. They had a lot of chores around the house in order just to sustain their life. Where nowadays we have certain food systems and other things, water systems that help us to give us more time in our life, that we have a lot more conveniences that we don't have to do as many mundane chores as they might have had to do during the lifetime of the Buddha. So even though there were people during the lifetime of the Buddha that were household practitioners who got to enlightenment, it was somewhat more rare than being an ordained practitioner. Nowadays, a household practitioner has a much better opportunity to get to enlightenment than even during the lifetime of the Buddha, because we have a lot more time in our life to do things like learning and reading and coming to the temple, meditating and things like this. So here the Buddha is guiding household practitioners. He's referring to them as one who's enjoying sensual pleasures, because a household practitioner tends to be indulgent in sensual pleasures. But you don't have to be. You can train your mind to not do those things, that you can actually train your mind to enjoy certain things that you might be participating in life, but you're not indulging in sensual pleasures and allowing the sensual desire of the mind to overwhelm the mind. So here he's giving guidance about what makes a household practitioner the foremost household practitioner, someone who's practicing the teachings. And he's providing 4 different things that he's sharing. There's other teachings as well for household practitioners, but this is just one particular teaching. He's talking about here an individual who seeks wealth righteously without violence. He provides guidance about how to conduct a livelihood where you're sustaining your life and developing income without harming others. He teaches this as part of the Eightfold Path. The Eightfold Path is the core central teaching of the Buddha, and there's a teaching there called right livelihood. Under right livelihood, he's explaining to you how you can cause harm through your livelihood if you choose to do things like selling weapons, selling living beings, selling meat, selling substances that cause heedlessness, or selling poisons. And by doing any of these types of trades, you're sustaining your life off of harming other beings. So here he's talking about someone who's acquiring wealth without harming others or causing violence to others. Then he talks about the second ground, that he makes himself joyful and pleased. An enlightened mind is going to be pleased and joyful all the time, that you're never going to experience even the slightest irritation or the slightest dislike towards another person. If your mind has certain pollution in your mind, you might dislike somebody. You might see the way someone looks, the way someone talks, maybe the clothes they wear, the way they interact. You might look at somebody else and decide that you don't like them for whatever number of reasons. But this is just the mind's own pollution. That person hasn't done anything to cause you to dislike them. It's your mind choosing to dislike them. But you can get to a point where you can be joyful and pleased all the time, that you don't have these expectations of wanting other people to be a certain way. That way you don't have dislike towards others, and you can live harmoniously with all beings. Then the third thing that he's talking about here is that he does meritorious deeds with the wealth that they've acquired. What merit is to give and share through practicing generosity. That when you're giving and you're sharing, you're practicing generosity. And this is going to help you to eliminate craving, desire, attachment, the primary cause of discontentedness in the mind. But there's a specific type of generosity called merit, that when you're sharing the resources or your time, your effort, your energy to be able to help the teachings of the Buddha to continue in the world, this will produce merit for you, in that you're helping other people to be able to have the opportunity to get to enlightenment, because maybe you're sharing your time, your effort, your energy, your resources. Maybe you're helping to clean the temple, or maybe you're providing donations to purchase some meditation mats or some carpets or something like this. If you're providing some type of time, effort, energy, or resources to be able to help other people to experience the learning of the teachings and develop their mind through the path to enlightenment, this generosity that you're practicing would be called merit. So the Buddha used to teach people that you can practice generosity with anybody and everybody, and you're going to need to do this in order to train the mind to let go and get to enlightenment. But you can also practice towards helping the teachings of the Buddha continue in the world. And then the fourth thing that he's talking about here is that when you have wealth, that you use it without being tied to it, obsessed with it, blindly absorbed in it, seeing the danger that if you allow your mind to base its inner feelings on this money, meaning your bank account's at one level, maybe you're happy and excited, but then if your bank account goes down, maybe you're sad and depressed. This is the challenge with the unenlightened mind, is that it will base its inner feelings based on some condition. So if your bank account is maybe a certain amount, you might be so happy or so excited, but then it goes down and now you're sad and you're frustrated or irritated. This is going to cause your mind to be continuously going up and down throughout your life, because your bank account is not permanent. It's not possible for your bank account to permanently be a certain balance. It's going to sometimes go up. It's going to sometimes go down. This is normal. So if you were tied to your wealth and obsessed with it, blindly absorbed in it, then your mind is going to have difficulties ever experiencing the peace and joy of the enlightened mind, because your mind is tied. Your emotions are tied, your feelings are tied to your bank account or to how much money or wealth that you have. So that's being able to see the danger in wealth, that there's no harm in acquiring wealth, but it's important that you don't get tied to it and obsessed with it. And then what he's talking about here, when he's talking about understanding the escape is training the mind on the Eightfold Path. When you're training your mind through the core central teachings, you can train your mind to let go and not be tied to money and wealth. And then your mind can be free and it can be liberated, not only from being tied by your emotions to your money, but other things in life too. Maybe your car or your house or your jewelry or your relationships with your mother, your dad, your brothers, your sisters. If somebody is sick or ill, or if somebody dies, your mind might be very frustrated or angry or grieving or feeling sad when people are sick or dying. This is because the mind is attached and basing its inner feelings on some condition. If mom is healthy, I'll be happy. If mom is unhealthy, I'll be sad. This is what the unenlightened mind is doing. It's going up and down, basing its inner feelings on some condition. So here the Buddha is explaining how you can kind of develop your practice around these four things. And as I mentioned, there's other teachings as well. And then he gives this analogy about milk coming from a cow and how it's continuously improved, getting to this cream of ghee, which during the lifetime of the Buddha, people would understand this because they were farmers. A lot of people were farming. So he uses a lot of farming analogies and things that people understood during the lifetime of the Buddha. So here he's talking about a household practitioner who's practicing in this way. It's like becoming this really good quality cream of ghee, going from just raw milk to this milk curd butter, butter ghee. From ghee comes cream of ghee, right? And this is kind of like a continuous improvement of the milk and kind of being refined more and more and more. Do you guys have any questions on this particular chapter? This is chapter 11 from volume 8. Mm-hmm.
I have a question that whenever generosity is done, if the towards this mic is,
I'm not sure if it's the battery or maybe the antenna or what, but let's see how it goes. It might be the other one. Might need the other one.
Okay.
Mm-hmm.
So whenever we do generosity, the person towards whom we are doing this generosity, if that is not righteous person or not following right moral conducts, then that generosity is not as valuable as doing merit. Does Buddha talk about this? Because I have studied some of the chapters that talks.
Yeah, he talks about higher and higher qualities of generosity which produce merit based on the individual that you're making the offering to. So when you're practicing generosity, it's really helpful for your mind to eliminate craving, desire, attachment. But as you choose to practice generosity with just an average person versus maybe someone who's already enlightened, he's talking about how that quality of the production of merit is much higher. In even beyond that, making an offering to an enlightened being versus a Buddha, for example, because by supporting these individuals, the teachings are able to more readily come into the world. So he always talks about being aware of who you're practicing generosity with. And it's not that you shouldn't practice generosity with someone who's just an average person who maybe isn't even practicing the teachings. You need to practice generosity with those types of individuals too, but it produces more benefit when you're practicing generosity with an individual who's in one of the 4 stages of enlightenment, for example, or an actual Buddha, because now these individuals are then able to share the teachings, which are going to ultimately help many, 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 many people. Okay, I'm not seeing any other questions, so let's go on to the next chapter, which is chapter 12. These words here are words from me. The way that this book is laid out in all the book series, volume 2 through 13, is you've got the words of the Buddha, you've got a reference back to the original source teachings in the Pali Canon, and then you've got words from me that are further helping you to reflect on the teachings of the Buddha to be able to glean more and more benefit from the words of the Buddha. So each one of these chapters are that way. So this is chapter 12. Is there someone who would like to read this? Don't be shy. It's okay. You can read. There's another microphone right there if you guys would like to try to use that one. Maybe we'll have less crackling. I think they're all shy, Koshi. You guys would like to practice your English? Yeah, practice your English. It's okay. Yeah, it's a good time. You can learn Buddhism and you can practice your English at the same time.
More terrible and frightful than the great inferno. Monks, there exists a hell named the Great Inferno. There, whatever form one sees with the eye is undesirable, never desirable, unlovely, never lovely, disagreeable, never agreeable. Whatever sound one hears with the ear is undesirable, never desirable, unlovely, never lovely, disagreeable, never agreeable. Whatever odor one smells with the nose is undesirable, never desirable, unlovely, never lovely, disagreeable, and never agreeable. Whatever flavor one tastes with the tongue is undesirable, never desirable, unlovely, never lovely, disagreeable, never agreeable. Whatever physical object one touches with the body is undesirable, never desirable, unlovely, never lovely, disagreeable, never agreeable. Whatever mental object one recognizes with the mind is undesirable, never desirable, unlovely, never lovely, disagreeable, never agreeable. When this was said, a certain monk said to the perfectly enlightened one that Inferno, Venerable Sir, is indeed terrible. That inferno is indeed very terrible. But is there, Venerable Sir, any other inferno more terrible and frightful than that one? There is, monk. But what, Venerable Sir, is that inferno more terrible and frightful than that one? Those as the ascetics and Brahmins, monks who do not understand as it really is. This is discontentedness. This is the cause of discontentedness. This is the elimination of discontentedness. This is the way leading to the elimination of discontentedness. They delight in volitional formations, choices and decisions that lead to birth, in volitional formations that lead to aging, in volitional formations that lead to death, in volitional formations that lead to sorrow, grief, pain, displeasure, and despair. Delighting in such volitional formations, choices, and decisions, they generate volitional formations that lead to birth, generate volitional formations that lead to aging, generate volitional formations that lead to death, generate volitional formations that lead to sorrow, grief, pain, displeasure, and despair. Having generated such volitional formations, choices, or decisions, they are burnt by the inferno of birth, burnt by the inferno of aging, burnt by the inferno of death, burnt by the inferno of sorrow, grief, pain, displeasure, and despair. They are not freed from birth, aging, and death, not freed from sorrow, grief, pain, displeasure, and despair, not freed from discontentedness, I say.
Okay, thank you, Kushi. So here there's a student of the Buddha asking him about the realm of hell. And during the lifetime of the Buddha, they had various descriptions of hell, very unique categorization of different types of hells and even different types of heavenly realms as well. The goal of the teachings of the Buddha isn't to be reborn into heaven, and hell isn't a permanent place that you go to be persecuted or in painful experiences for the rest of existence. That's not the way the cycle of rebirth is, that beings are moving in and out of these various realms at different times. And you can imagine that a student might ask a Buddha questions about these various realms. The Buddha taught the hell realm, animal realm, afflicted spirit realm, the human realm, and the heavenly realm. And here he's asking about the hell realm. And the Buddha is describing for him about this hell realm, this great inferno, which is like a great fire. And he's explaining how the senses, the eyes, ears, nose, tongue, the body, and the mind are going to experience these undesirable, disagreeable experiences through the eyes, ears, nose, tongue, body, and the mind. And then the monk says, well, is there another inferno? Is there another hell that's worse than this? And the Buddha says, yes, there is. And then the student says, well, what is it? What's the one that's more terrible and frightful than this one? And he says, an individual who doesn't understand the Four Noble Truths. The Four Noble Truths is the very first teaching of the Buddha, where he's explaining to you what is the problem in the unenlightened mind, what is the cause of that problem, what is the elimination, and what is the path forward. This is a real breakthrough in an individual's development on the path to enlightenment, is when they learn and understand the Four Noble Truths. You can see that your mind is causing its own anger, your own frustration, your own guilt and shame and fear, your own boredom and loneliness, all these discontent feelings that you experience, like stress and anxiety, irritability, all of these things, your mind is actually causing it itself. In the unenlightened state, you might firmly believe that other people are causing you to be angry, or other people are irritating you. But when you study the teachings of the Buddha, you can see and independently verify that your mind is causing its own anger. Your mind's causing your own discontent feelings. No matter what feeling you're experiencing, the mind is causing it itself. And by not knowing that and not understanding it through the Four Noble Truths, which the Buddha explains, this is just here pointing to the Four Noble Truths, but in the Four Noble Truths, he explains it for you in such a way that you can see the truth for yourself. By you not understanding what the Four Noble Truths are, and that your mind is causing its own discontent feelings, the Buddha is equating that to living in hell, because it's so difficult to be able to go through life thinking that other people are causing you to be angry, because you'll never solve your problem. You'll never solve your anger. You'll never solve your stress and anxiety, your irritability, and all your other discontent feelings, as long as you believe that somebody else is causing you to feel a certain way. But when you see the truth, then you can actually understand what the causes and conditions are that are leading to your discontent feelings, and then you can actually eliminate them. But until then, the Buddha is equating this to like living in hell, because you would continue to walk around being angry, stressed, having anxiety, being frustrated, irritable, and all kinds of other discontent feelings. You wouldn't be able to solve it until you know what the problem is, the cause, the elimination, and the path forward. And that's what he's describing here. And then he's saying, once you don't understand those things, then you're going to make decisions, choices and decisions that are going to lead to continuous birth, aging, and death. That this is the cycle of rebirth. That if you don't understand the Four Noble Truths, you're going to continue to make decisions that lead to sorrow, grief, pain, displeasure, and despair. You're going to continue to experience these feelings over and over and over again if you don't know what's causing them and you don't know how to eliminate them. The very first teaching of the Buddha is the Four Noble Truths, which explains to you that craving, desire, attachment, the mental longing and strong eagerness, the mind itself is causing these discontent feelings. And when you understand that, then you can take action to fix it and resolve it. But until then, you'll just keep making decisions over and over and over that leads to birth, aging, and death, as well as these continuous feelings. So that's what he's describing here. Any questions on this chapter? Okay, let's go on to the next chapter then. Chapter 13. By the way, these books are available on our website at no cost. The website is buddhadailywisdom.com. You can download them for free. You can take them and go print them if you like, or you can get printed copies here at the temple or on Amazon. If you have access to Amazon in your country, you can get any of these books printed or Kindle versions through Amazon as well. So this is chapter 13. Kushi, I think that you're going to end up reading all the chapters because they're shy.
Yeah, I'm fine with it.
Okay, very good. I can help you if you need help. Okay. Just let me know.
4 qualities of a wholesome person. Monks, one who possesses 4 qualities can be understood to be a wholesome person. What 4? First, here monks, a wholesome person does not disclose the faults of others even when asked about them, how much less than when not asked. But when he is asked about them, then led on by questions, he speaks about the faults of others with gaps and omissions, not fully or in detail. It can be understood this individual is a wholesome person. Second, again, a wholesome person discloses the virtues of others even when not asked about them, how much more than when asked. But when he is asked about them, then led on by questions, he speaks about the virtues of others without gaps and omissions, fully and in detail. It can be understood this individual is a wholesome person. Again, a wholesome person discloses his own faults even when not asked about them, how much more than when asked. But when he is asked about them, then led on by questions, he speaks about his own faults without gaps and omissions, fully and in detail. It can be understood this individual is a wholesome person. Fourth, again, a wholesome person does not disclose his own virtues even when asked about them, how much less than when not asked. But when he is asked about them, then led on by questions, he speaks about his own virtues with gaps and omissions, not fully or in detail. It can be understood this individual is a wholesome person. One who possesses these four qualities can be understood as a wholesome person.
Okay, thank you, Koshi. So here the Buddha is explaining these four qualities. The first two that he's talking about has to do with talking about other people. That if you're talking about other people in positive ways, the Buddha is saying this is wholesome. He teaches in the Eightfold Path, moral conduct. It's called right speech, right action, and right livelihood. Here you're learning about the natural law of Gotama, about certain decisions that you make about your moral conduct, and how if you put out harm will come back to you. So if you're slandering people or gossiping about people, meaning damaging their reputation, even if what you're saying is true, this individual being harmed, they can then potentially be interested in harming you. So what the Buddha teaches you is through your speech, your actions, and your livelihood to purify this based on the natural law of Gotama so that you're not causing harm to others. Because if you cause harm, this harm will then come back to you. You're going to experience unwholesome results based on your decisions and your lack of wisdom of causing harm through your speech, for example, slandering. So here he's saying that a wholesome person does not disclose the faults of others, even when asked about them. Right? That it would be unwise to talk about other people's faults. That's not your job in life, to go around talking about all the unwholesome things that other people are doing or all the unwise things that other people are doing. Oftentimes that's what the unenlightened mind does because of its ego. It wants to diminish other people because it feels like by diminishing other people, it makes you look better. But what you would like to do is get to the point where you're not interested in diminishing other people. So the Buddha is explaining here in the first two that if somebody asks you about the faults of others, that you don't really disclose those, that it would be unwise for you to do so. But of course, you might be in a situation where maybe you're at work or you need to give some feedback, and maybe your boss asks you about working with a particular employee. Maybe this is a new employee and the boss is looking for information to get some feedback. And if you're going to provide some kind of input to somebody about a coworker, it would be wise to do that in a positive and uplifting way. There's ways to talk in positive ways where you can be encouraging and supportive of an individual rather than being diminishing. By you speaking in a professional manner with your boss about this coworker, it can help you to maintain your reputation at work and be very successful. So you might find yourself in situations where people are asking you about an individual. If it's a friend or family or something like this, there's no need for you to explain all the different things that you see that this person might be doing in an unwise way. It's better to just not share those type of things. But if you're in a situation like an employee or something like this, you might need to share some things in order to actually do your job. But just be sure that you're doing that in a positive, uplifting, and professional way. And this will maintain your ability to not cause harm to others, and therefore harm won't come back to you. Number 3 and 4 that the Buddha is talking about, here he's talking about how one speaks about themselves, because part of the path to enlightenment is to eliminate your ego. The ego is conceit, arrogance, pride, boastfulness, judging other people, measuring and comparing yourself to others, and putting yourself either above people or putting yourself below people. As long as you're doing this, you're not going to be able to experience peace and joy in your life and in your relationships. So it's not about judging other people, about who's good or who's bad and putting yourself above others or below others. This would be very unwise for you. So here, the number 3 and 4, he's relating this to how you talk about yourself. That when people ask you questions, that you're not boastful about all your credentials and everything that you're involved in and who you are and what you've been involved in. Because if you practice that and you're being arrogant and boastful and conceited around others, people aren't going to enjoy spending time with you because you're putting yourself above others. So here the Buddha is explaining that if someone talks to you or asks you about your thoughts, that you're willing to expose those. But then also if they ask you about your virtues, that you don't really, explain all your amazing credentials of how great and wonderful of a person you are, because that's going to promote the arrogance in the mind, the boastfulness and the pride. And this is just going to hinder your ability to living harmoniously with all beings. Do you guys have questions on this one? Okay, so we'll go to the next one, which is chapter 14. This is actually the same as the previous chapter. It's just explaining it in a different way. The first chapter is explaining it as wholesome qualities. Here, the Buddha is explaining it as unwholesome qualities. He's saying an unwholesome person discloses the thoughts of others, even when not asked about them. An unwholesome person does not disclose the virtues of others. An unwholesome person does not disclose his own thoughts. An unwholesome person discloses his virtues even when not asked about them. So this is the same thing. I don't know that we necessarily need to read this. It's the exact same teaching, but just flipped around and reversed. So let's go to chapter 15. As you guys see here, I describe all of this for you guys in detail, helping you to understand. So let's go to chapter 15.
With an unaffected mind residing compassionate. Faguna, if anyone speaks critical in your presence, you should abandon any desires and any thoughts based on the household life. And herein you should train thus. My mind will be unaffected, and I shall speak no evil words. I shall recite compassionate for his welfare, and with a mind of loving kindness without inner hate. That is how you should train Faguna. If anyone should give you a blow with his hand, with a clod, with a stick, or with a knife, you should abandon any desires and any thoughts based on the household life. And herein you should train thus. My mind will be unaffected, and I shall speak no evil words. I shall recite compassionate for his welfare with a mind of loving kindness without inner hate. That is how you should train Faguna.
Thank you, Koshi. So here the Buddha is providing guidance on how to reside with a mind that's unaffected by what other people choose to do. And what he's saying is if other people are trying to do harmful things to you, that train your mind to be unaffected by that. You still might not choose to be around those individuals, but it would be unwise to allow your mind to be shaken up. So if somebody speaks harsh and aggressive and hostile to you, what you might feel the tendency to do based on the household life is you might try to be harsh and hostile and aggressive back and think that this is somehow going to solve the problem. But that's very unwise. When someone's harsh or hostile or aggressive, hateful with you, it's better to just ignore it, to walk away and move on. There's nothing that's going to be solved by you being angry and argumentative and hostile and aggressive back. That's not going to solve anything at all. That's just like two animals choosing to fight. So So if somebody comes at you with a bunch of aggression and hostility, it's better to just remain calm, remain composed, and just walk away. That's the easiest thing to do, just to ignore the situation and walk away. And then you might choose to no longer associate with this person. But if you're experiencing any painful feelings as a result of someone speaking harsh, you're causing those painful feelings. The individual who's talking harshly isn't causing the painful feelings. The mind itself is causing those painful feelings. So just choosing to move on from that individual isn't going to solve your painful feelings, but still it's unwise to associate with individuals who are constantly and repetitively harsh and hostile and aggressive with you. You'll still need to eliminate your craving, desire, attachment in the mind, which is producing the painful feelings. But doing that, you might choose wisely to not associate with an individual who's being harsh or hostile or aggressive. And that's what the Buddha is explaining here essentially. He explains it in more detail in another chapter here you're going to see in a moment. But what he's saying here, any desires and any thoughts based on the household life, that's what he's talking about, is that in the household life, you might feel like the wise thing to do is be argumentative and aggressive back. But what you're going to see is that's not going to solve your problems. If you have any relationships where people are harsh and aggressive and hostile with you, and you've been harsh and hostile back, you can see it doesn't solve the problem. It just keeps going on and on and on and on and on. The way that you solve it is you train your mind to have this compassion and loving kindness. That's the exact opposite of any anger, hatred, and ill will. As long as somebody picks up a rubber ball and they throw it around in the room and it bounces around and bounces around, if you pick up the rubber ball and you throw it, and then they pick up the rubber ball and they throw it, you've got a bunch of rubber balls that are bouncing around in the room and your guys' heads are spinning. But if somebody picks up a rubber ball and they throw it around the room and you just watch it roll into the corner and it just sits in the corner, and it lost its energy because you're not picking it up anymore. So this argumentative speech from another person, it loses its energy. And that's essentially what you're doing when you're practicing loving kindness and compassion. Loving kindness is a genuine interest in seeing all beings be well, active goodwill. What compassion is concern for the misfortune of others. So when you're practicing loving kindness and compassion, this active goodwill, this genuine interest in seeing others be well, this concern for the misfortune of others, then you can extinguish the anger, hatred, ill will that's in your own mind. And then you can clean up your relationships where you're not involved in relationships where people are aggressive and hostile, bitter, and having animosity in your relationships. But as long as you have the bitterness and hostility in your mind, the people around you will have it as well. So you're going to need to clean up your own mind if you're interested in cleaning up your life and experiencing more peace and joy in your relationships. Any questions on this chapter? Okay, not seeing any questions, so let's move to the next one, which is chapter 16. This is where the Buddha goes into a lot more detail.
Training a mind filled with loving kindness without hostility or ill will. Monks, there are these 5 courses of speech that others may use when they address you. Their speech may be timely or untimely, true or untrue, gentle or harsh, connected with benefits or unbeneficial, spoken with a mind of loving kindness or with inner hate. Herein, monks, you should train thus. Our minds will remain unaffected, and we shall speak no evil words. We shall recite compassionate for their welfare with a mind of loving kindness without inner hate. We shall recite enveloping that person with a mind filled with loving kindness and sharing with him. We shall recite enveloping the all-encompassing world with a mind filled with loving kindness, abundant, joyful, immeasurable, without hostility and without ill will. That is how you should train monks. Monks, suppose a man came with crimson, turmeric, indigo, or carmine and said, I shall draw pictures and make pictures appear on empty space. What do you think, monks? Could that man draw pictures and make pictures appear on empty space? No, Venerable Sir. Why is that? Because empty space is formless and invisible. He cannot possibly draw pictures there or make pictures appear there. Eventually, the man would reap only tiredness and disappointment. So too, monks, there are these 5 courses of speech that others may use when they address you. Herein, monks, you should train thus: our minds will remain unaffected, and we shall speak no evil words. We shall recite compassionate for their welfare, with a mind of loving kindness, without inner hate. We shall recite enveloping them with a mind filled with loving kindness, and starting with them, we shall recite enveloping the all-encompassing world with a mind filled with loving kindness, abundant, joyful, immeasurable, without hostility and without ill will. That is how you should train monks. The Buddha also spoke several other similes, a simile of a man who came with a hoe and a basket and said, I shall make this great earth to be without earth. Okay. A simile of a man with a blazing grass torch and said, I shall heat up and burn away the river Ganges with the blazing grass torch. Eventually, that man would reap only in tiredness and disappointment. Monks, even if criminals were to sever, what? How is it pronounced?
Yeah, that's correct.
Okay. Monks, even if criminals were to sever you savagely limb by limb with a 2-handled saw, he who gave rise to a mind of hate towards them would not be practicing my teachings. Herein, monks, you should train thus: our minds will remain unaffected, and we shall speak no evil words. And it's repeated. Mm-hmm. Yeah, monks, if you keep this advice on the simile of the saw constantly in mind, do you see any course of speech, insignificant or significant, that you could not endure? No, Venerable Sir. Therefore, monks, you should keep this advice on the simile of the saw constantly in mind. That will lead to your welfare and peacefulness for a long time.
Okay, thank you, Kushi. So here at the beginning, the Buddha is explaining certain speech. And in his teachings called the 5 Factors of Well-Spoken Speech, he's helping you to understand the natural law of karma, of how to speak in ways that isn't harmful to others. When you use the 5 factors of well-spoken speech, you'll see that your relationships and your conversations will go very well. That when you speak at the right time, what you say is true, you speak gentle, you speak beneficially, and you speak with a mind of loving kindness. This is how you're guided to speak, and you will have your own personality, your own character. But if you use this guidance, which is based on the natural law of karma, you will see that you'll be able to interact with people in a very harmonious way. But as you're training your mind to do that, and even as you are doing that, you're going to get to a point where you're able to practice that all the time. And more in your relationships will really blossom, both personally and professionally. But still, there'll be occasional people that will speak to you in an untimely way, or they will speak falsehoods, or they will speak harsh, or they will speak unbeneficially, or they will speak with a mind of inner hate. This is the impermanent nature of the world, that not everybody is going to speak with you polite, kind, friendly, and respectful. It's just not possible. It'd be wonderful if people did, but you can't have that expectation, because as soon as you have the expectation that everybody should speak to you in a certain way, when somebody doesn't speak to you that way, you're going to get angry. And you're going to get frustrated. Your mind's causing this itself based on its craving, desire, attachment. We're not talking about what's wise or unwise in terms of the other individual, because it's wise to speak at the right time. What you say is true, gentle, beneficial, and with a mind of loving kindness. What we're talking about is not everybody's training in these teachings. So not everybody's going to be speaking in this way, that you will ultimately decide, if you would like to progress on the path to enlightenment, to move your practice to this point. So the Buddha is sharing that when people speak with you in this way, whether they're using the 5 factors of well-spoken speech or not, he's saying, train your mind to not be affected. That when other people are speaking with you in untimely ways, or they're speaking falsehood, or they're speaking harsh, or unbeneficially, or with a mind of inner hate, he's saying, train your mind to be unaffected by that, because it's just impermanence. That's all it is. In this person, we can have loving kindness and compassion for them. Understand that they haven't been exposed to this wisdom of the teachings of the Buddha, and that because of that, they're struggling. And we should have concern for their misfortune. So this is a way to help you to protect your mind so that you don't get your mind all shaken up when other people are speaking in unwise ways. And then he explains this analogy where he says, if somebody comes with these different colors and different substances, could they paint a picture or draw a picture on empty space? And his students say, no, of course not. Well, it's the same thing as if people are aggressive and hostile and bitter and harsh with you. If you don't give that harshness a place to reside, then it can't stick. It can't cause your mind to be shaken up. Just think of this body and this mind. This isn't who you are. But the challenge is that the unenlightened mind has ego, right? There's this conceit, there's this arrogance. So when somebody speaks to you bitter and harsh or hostile and aggressive, you might say, they're not going to talk to me that way. I'm a somebody and I got to show them who I am. This is like an animal. Like if an animal growls at you, then the other animal has to growl louder. And this other animal growling louder is trying to fear this one animal into stop growling. But this isn't the wise way to function in the human realm. In the animal realm, this is the way animals function. But in the human realm, we can be wiser. We can realize that if an animal growls at us, growling back at it isn't going to solve the problem. We can practice loving kindness and compassion, and this will train your mind to reside unaffected. And then you can resolve the situation and move past it. Whereas if you just growl back, if you just be argumentative back, it's not going to solve the problem. So don't give anybody's harsh speech or aggression or hostility a place to land. Realize that it's just a physical body. It's just a mind. Get rid of any sense of, I am a somebody in this world and I'm better than you and I need to be respected in a certain way and all these other things, because that's just going to allow the mind to dwell and get obsessed into thinking that you can be bitter and harsh and aggressive back and somehow this is going to solve the problem. Instead, you can be humble and peaceful and remain calm and tranquil, and this is actually going to solve the problem, and you're going to allow your mind to continue to be composed, where you can just walk away without any kind of bitterness or hostility in the mind. And then he gives another analogy where he talks about this saw. He talks about an individual being severed savagely by limb, where there's someone sawing you at the wrist or sawing you at the elbow or the shoulder and the ankle and the knee and the hip. And the Buddha is saying, if during this situation, if your hatred arises, that you're not practicing his teachings, right? Because you can get to the point where you have so much loving kindness and compassion where you understand if something like this was to occur, these individuals just don't understand what they're doing. It's not that you should sit there and let somebody, saw you from limb to limb to limb, right? Like if you need to protect this physical body, protect yourself, right? But you can actually do a whole lot of protection by the decisions that you make prior to ever getting into this kind of situation. A Buddha is going to use very elaborate and very kind of excessive stories like this to illustrate a point, because remember, he's teaching in the oral tradition. And when you're teaching in the oral tradition, you need to get people to remember your teachings. So one of the ways to get people to remember your teachings is to speak in very graphic ways, in excess like this, where he's saying, yeah, if somebody's sawing you from limb to limb to limb, remain peaceful, remain with loving kindness and compassion. But he's also not telling you to just sit there and let somebody saw you from limb to limb to limb. There's a whole lot of decisions that one is making that leads up to those kinds of situations. So if you're practicing things like right speech, right action, right livelihood, you won't find yourself in that type of situation. But if you were in that situation, the Buddha is explaining to remain with loving kindness and compassion. That if you allow hate to arise in the mind, then you're not practicing the teachings of the Buddha, because an enlightened being, it's impossible for them to have hate. The mind has been so well trained that you can no longer even experience hate. That pollution has been eliminated from the mind. So here, the Buddha is providing this really graphic explanation to be able to help illustrate a point and help his students to actually remember it. But in your day-to-day life, it would be wise to practice things like right intention, right speech, right action, and others in order to not end up in a situation like this, right? So any questions on this, you can put it into Facebook, YouTube, or Zoom for those of you guys online. And then here, if you guys have a question, you're welcome to raise your hand. Can you use the microphone so that people online can hear you?
So does that mean that we should live without emotions?
I think you have to turn it on.
So does that mean that we should live without emotions?
So in the unenlightened state, you will form your emotions and feelings based on some condition. That if my bank account is this, I'll be happy. If my bank account's this, I'll be sad. If I walk down the street and nobody bumps into me, I will be happy. If somebody bumps into me, I'll be angry and frustrated and irritated. This is because the mind is untrained and it's forming its emotions or its feelings based on some condition. By the time you get to enlightenment, there's going to be nothing but mental qualities of peace and calm, serenity, contentedness with joy. This doesn't mean that you don't have emotion. It just means that your mind isn't shaken up by the things that are going on around you. You'll have mental qualities of joy that are just always easily accessible, that you can smile, you can be joyful, you can be pleased. You walk down the street, somebody bumps into you. Maybe in the unenlightened state, you might be angry or irritable. Your ego might arise. You might want to fight this person because somebody bumped into you. But by the time you get to enlightenment, you realize like, hey, I will walk down the street and in the most cases, nobody's going to bump into me. But every once in a while, because of what we call impermanence, then there's going to be someone who bumps into you. And you could just say sorry, or they might say sorry, or they may not say sorry. So by the time you get to enlightenment, you have eliminated what's called conditioned feelings, which you're referring to as emotion. You will have eliminated conditional feelings where you're basing your inner feelings on some condition. You'll have unconditioned mental qualities where the mind will just always be peaceful, calm, serene, and content with joy. But you shouldn't think of it as emotionless or like numb or like a robot. That's not the way that the enlightened mind is experiencing things. But as you're transitioning from the unenlightened mind to the enlightened mind, you are going to experience certain conditioned feelings. You can't just snap your fingers and eliminate your irritation or eliminate your annoyance or agitation or anger. It's gradual training, gradual practice, and gradual progress that you can eventually get to the point where your mind's not shaken up. Because when you get agitated or annoyed or frustrated, you can't make wise decisions. You're going to make unwise decisions that produce unwholesome results in your life. But if something occurs in your life and you can maintain your calmness and composure, now you can access your wisdom and make wise decisions that lead to wholesome results. So the Buddha is guiding you through all of his teachings about how to maintain your calmness and composure so that you can then make wise decisions that produce wholesome results, that your mind doesn't need to be shaken up by the various things that happen around the world. You're welcome. Okay, so let's go to the next chapter, which is chapter 17. Would you like to read this one since you have the microphone? Yeah, you can sit wherever you like.
Recite with the mind of a newly arrived bride. monks, when the bride is first brought into the home, whether at night or during the day, at first she sets up a diligent sense of moral wrongdoing and moral concern toward her mother-in-law, her father-in-law, her husband, and even the slaves, workers, and the servants. But after some time, as a result of living together and intimacy with them, she says to her mother-in-law, her father-in-law, and her husband, "Go away, what do you know?" So too, when some monk here has gone forth from the household life into homelessness, whether by night or during the day, at first he sets up a diligent sense of moral wrongdoing and moral concern toward the male ordained practitioners, the female ordained practitioners, the male household practitioners, the female household practitioners, and even toward the monastery workers and novices. But after some time, as a result of living together and intimacy with them, he says even to his teacher and his preceptor, "Go away, what do you know?" Therefore, monks, you should train yourself thus. We will recite with the mind like that of a newly arrived bride. It is in such a way that you should train yourselves.
All right, thank you. So here the Buddha is using an analogy of a new bride who comes and moves in with her husband's family, because when she first moves in, she's probably very appreciative, very grateful. She's probably trying to form great relationships with everybody to kind of ease into the household and get along with those that are there. But over time, maybe her attentiveness to the relationship starts to fade away, and she starts to be kind of grumpy and irritable, and talks to her mother and father-in-law like, "What do you know? Get away from me," right? Maybe even her husband as well. And the Buddha is just using a female here as an example because he's talking with males, but very well we could be talking about a husband moving in with a wife's family as well, and a same thing could occur, right? Well, he's saying the same thing can occur when a student starts to learn with a teacher. That as you start to learn with a teacher, initially you might be on your best behavior, trying to create a really good relationship with the teacher, not to offend anyone. But then over time, as you start to get comfortable in that environment, you might being grumpy or irritable with the teacher, like, "What do you know? Like, get away from me," right? Because initially, when you first start learning on the path to enlightenment, everything's new. So it's like a new car, right? It's got that new car smell, so to speak. And now when you start learning and you start realizing that, yeah, it's actually quite challenging in some situations where you're building up your meditation practice, you're building up your wisdom, you're meeting certain difficulties and struggles in life, it can be really challenging to apply these teachings and get the help that you need. And when you start, the rubber meets the road, so to speak, when you start doing the real work on the path to enlightenment and you're coming to a teacher for help, you might get grumpy and irritable with that teacher and thinking that the teacher is somehow causing your problems. But in reality, the mind itself is causing these problems. So the Buddha is explaining to you that when you're learning with a teacher, to continue to be like a newly arrived bride, where you're always thinking about how I can get along in this environment, how I can develop nice relationships, how can I ensure that I'm learning the teachings and doing so in a very diligent way. And this is what's going to produce the best results for you. If you get like really, really super comfortable in relationships and you stop being attentive to having good moral conduct, then the relationship can slip away from you and it can become very problematic in your life. So it's very wise to be attentive to your moral conduct in all situations, in all relationships, even after you've been living at a certain place or you've been going to a certain school or a certain job for a period of time. You might have noticed that with your occupation. Maybe the first few weeks or the first few months at a brand new job, you might be on your best behavior, trying to do really well. But then after you kind of get acquainted acquainted with the environment and people know you, you may start slipping up and talking to your coworkers or your boss in a certain unwise way. And this erodes your ability to be successful in that environment. So what you would like to do is maintain your ability to have good moral conduct all the way throughout your relationships and have that be sustaining rather than allow it to slip away, like what the Buddha is describing here in this story. So any questions here on this particular chapter, chapter 17? Okay, so normally we take a break, but we're almost done here. So I think that if we just keep going, we'll actually be finished in another 15 or 20 minutes. But normally we take about a 15 or 20 minute break and then we come back and learn some more. But if we did that, then we'd end up just kind of, finishing in 15 or 20 minutes anyway. So I think we'll just keep going. And if you guys need a break, there's a bathroom back there in the back on the far right, and there's some water. You guys are welcome to get that and use that if you need it. So let's see, chapter 18. Is there someone who would like to read this one? So one of the things you can do to get over your shyness is put the mind in the situation that it's shy about. This is part of the training of the path to enlightenment. No? Would you like to read? Yeah, go ahead and put your mind in that situation. You'll see that nothing's going to harm you.
You should help me.
That's okay. We'll help you if you need help.
5 factors of well-spoken speech. Monks, possessing 5 factors. Speech is well-spoken, not badly spoken. It is blameless and beyond reproach. Disapproved by the wise. What 5? First, it is spoken at the proper time. Second, what is said is true. Third, it is spoken gently. Fourth, what is said to is beneficial. Fifth, it is spoken with a mind of loving kindness. Possessing these 5 factors, speech is well spoken, not badly spoken. It is blameless and beyond reproach, disapproval by the wise.
All right, thank you. Very good job. So here the Buddha is explaining the natural law of karma related to speech. And in the Eightfold Path, he explains a first level of detail. He talks about eliminating lying, eliminating slander, harsh speech, and frivolous speech. But then he goes deeper in his teachings and he talks about the 5 factors of well-spoken speech here, which is very wise for an individual to use. And the way that the teachings of the Buddha is they're not to be believed. They're not rules or commandments. You can actually look at relationships and conversations where you use these 5 factors of well-spoken speech, and you can see that they went really well. Or you can look at situations or conversations where you didn't use these 5 factors of well-spoken speech, and you can see that the conversation didn't go very well. So this is your independent reflection based on your direct experience. You can see that when you don't speak at the right time, meaning you interrupt people, or your mind is angry and bitter and harsh, or you jump on somebody like as soon as they walk in the door, as you do that, it's not the right time for you to talk, and the conversation didn't go very well. Or in situations where you lied, right? Because we've all lied in the past at different times. You can see that people discovered your lies, and there's challenges that you encountered because of that. Or if you didn't speak gentle, right? This is about your tone, your tempo, and your word choice. If you were harsh and aggressive in your tone, your tempo, and your word choice, you can see that your conversation didn't go well, and it might have even resulted in your relationship ending with that person. Speaking beneficially is ensuring that as you speak, that you're doing so in a conversation, that you're not just having a craving, desire, attachment, a longing, a yearning to hurry up and talk 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 and talk. This is like broadcasting, right? Nobody enjoys being in a conversation where somebody's just broadcasting to you. So it's important for you to not do that, so that when you're in a conversation, that it's an actual conversation back and forth. Whereas if you were speaking unbeneficially, we call this frivolous speech or idle chatter, where it's just yada, 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 over and over and over again. And then the fifth factor is with a mind of loving kindness. The opposite of this would be with a mind of inner hate. If you speak with a mind of inner hate, it's going to produce unwholesome results in your life. So this is a wise way to be able to speak. And in volume 1, chapter 5, I go into a lot of detail about the 5 factors of well-spoken speech, explaining them. And I have it here in this chapter as well. I explain right speech. I explain about speaking at the proper time. What does that mean? What does it mean to speak the truth? What does it mean to be spoken gently? What does it mean to speak beneficially? And what does it mean to speak with a mind of loving kindness? So that way you can learn and you can dial in your practice closer and closer, where you can speak with your family and your friends and your coworkers in this way. And if you learn and you train your mind to speak in this way, what you'll find is your relationships will be so much more successful. You'll be able to live harmoniously and peacefully and joyfully with all the people around you as you choose to speak in this way. But then you understand from the previous discourse that not everybody's going to speak to you this way. And that's where you can train your mind to continue to remain peaceful and joyful regardless of how other people might choose to speak with you. And again, you might not choose to associate with those individuals, but you can train your mind to be unaffected by however anybody's choosing to interact with you. Any questions on this one? Okay, so let's go to the next chapter, which is chapter 19. Would someone like to read this one? Okay, maybe I'll read, okay? I'll read this one. All right, this one is titled, Seeing One Another in Future Lives. Monks, if both husband and wife aspire to see one another, not only in this present life, but also in future lives, they should have the same confidence, the same virtuous behavior, the same generosity, and the same wisdom. Then they will see one another, not only in this present life, but also in future lives. Both husband and wife are enriched with confidence, charitable, and mentally disciplined, living their lives righteously, addressing each other with pleasant words. Many benefits accumulate to them, and they reside at ease. Their enemies are saddened when both are the same in virtue, moral conduct. Having practiced the teachings here, the same in virtuous behavior and observances, delighting after death in a heavenly world, they rejoice, enjoying sensual pleasures. Okay, so let me explain to you what the Buddha is sharing here. The goal of the teachings of the Buddha is not to be reborn into a future life. The goal is to train your mind and get to enlightenment in this life. So the goal of the teachings of the Buddha isn't to believe a whole bunch of things now and hope that something good happens when you die. Instead, you're learning his teachings now, you're reflecting on those to independently verify them, and then you're practicing his teachings now in this life and training your mind, and you experience the results in this life. You see that your mind's becoming more peaceful and more joyful in this life. But if somebody falls short of enlightenment and they need to be reborn, they're going to be reborn into one of these 5 realms based on the condition of their mind at the time of death. This would be one's karma, or some people might say karma, the cause and effect, or action and result. So based on the condition of one's mind at the time of death, they're going to be reborn into some other realm. And what the Buddha is explaining here is that if a two partners are living together and they have the same confidence, the same virtuous behavior, the same generosity, and the same wisdom, that they are likely to be reborn in a future life together and see each other in this future life, right? So the confidence is the confidence in the Buddha, the teachings, the community. This is whenever he's talking about confidence, that's what he's talking about. When he's talking about this virtuous behavior, he's talking about moral conduct, like right speech, right action, and right livelihood, because this is wisdom that you need to cultivate in order to not cause harm to others, and then harm won't come back to you. When he's talking about generosity, this is the giving and the sharing of more than is strictly required in any given situation, without any expectation of anything in return, where you're sharing your time, your effort, your energy, and your resources without any expectation of anything in return. That's what generosity would be. And that will help you to eliminate their craving, desire, attachment, which is causing the mind to be discontent. And then when he's talking about wisdom, he's talking about wisdom of things like the three universal truths, the four noble truths, the eightfold path, the five precepts, the natural law of karma, all of these teachings that he's sharing. If you and your partner have wisdom of these teachings, you guys will be able to create a wonderful life together. Where if one person is practicing the teachings and one person isn't, you guys will really struggle in life. But if you're looking to have a partnership with a life partner, you can cultivate these qualities for your mind, and you can encourage and support your partner to also cultivate these same qualities: the confidence, the virtuous behavior, the generosity, and the wisdom. And this will prove to create a lot of peacefulness and joy in your relationship together. And if you guys should happen to fall short of enlightenment in this life, then the Buddha is sharing, in your next life, you will be reborn in a future life together. It doesn't mean you're going to be husband and wife in your next life. You might be brother and sister, or some other relative, or something like that, or brother and brother, or sister and sister. But what he's explaining is that you will see each other in a future life. Okay, so any questions on this? Okay, so let's go to our last chapter for today, which is chapter 20. Okay, 7 kinds of wife. Oh, you have a question? Mm-hmm.
So it happens most of the time that when we meet some strangers, it feels because they are so wise, and it feels like they were some relatives of yours in past life. But does this have to do anything in this life? Like, do we need to make any decisions because we are in contact with these people? There is no indication that we have to do something about that. That is not it, right?
No, there's nothing special that you need to do. Like if you know that you've been involved in this relationship that you're in now, if you happen to figure out that it is from a previous life, there's nothing special that you need to do because of that. The Buddha is just explaining to you that, hey, if you're having these great relationships in this life based on confidence, virtuous behavior, generosity, and wisdom, and this relationship's going really well, if you guys don't get to enlightenment, you're going to see each other in a future life too. So that's kind of reassuring to know that any relationships that you're working on in this life, and you're getting to the point where this is a really healthy relationship, if you guys happen to be reborn in the future, then it's likely that you're going to be reborn within proximity to each other, that you're going to have another relationship in a future life. And this can kind of incentivize you, so to speak, that yes, let's work out these relationships and let's get really healthy relationships in this life, because it's going to help you in this life, but it can also help you in a future life too. But if you knew that information, that this relationship is from a previous life, there's nothing special that you need to do or be attentive to, because everything that you're choosing to do is based on decisions right now in the present moment, not based on the past. Mm-hmm. Would you like to read this one, Kushi?
7 kinds of wives. Then in the morning, the perfectly enlightened one, dressed took his bowl and robe, and went to the residence of the householder Anathapindika, where he sat down on the seat that was prepared for him. Now on that occasion, people in Anathapindika's residence were making an uproar and a disturbance. Then the householder Anathapindika approached the perfectly enlightened one, paid homage, respect to him, and sat down to one side. The perfectly enlightened one then said to him, "Householder, why are people in your residence making such an uproar and a disturbance? One would think it was a fisherman at a haul of fish. This, venerable sir, is my daughter-in-law Sujata, who is rich and has been brought here from a rich family. She doesn't obey her father-in-law, her mother-in-law, or her husband. She doesn't even honor, respect, appreciate, and venerate the perfectly enlightened one." Then the perfectly enlightened one addressed Sujata, "Come here, Sujata." "Yes, venerable sir," she replied. She went to the perfectly enlightened one, paid homage, respect to him, and sat down to one side. The perfectly enlightened one then said to her, "Sujata, a man might have 7 kinds of wives." "What 7? "One like a killer, and one like a thief, one like a tyrant, one like a mother, one like a sister, one like a friend, and one like a helper. A man might have thus 7 kinds of wives. Which one are you?" "Venerable sir, I do not understand in detail the meaning of the statement that the perfectly enlightened one has spoken in brief. Please let the perfectly enlightened one teach me the teachings in such a way that I might understand in detail the meaning of the statement spoken in brief." "Then listen and attend closely, Sujata. I will speak." "Yes, venerable sir," she replied. The perfectly enlightened one said this: "First, with hateful mind, lacking of compassion, lusting for others, despising her husband, she seeks to kill the one who bought her with wealth. A wife like this is called a wife and a killer. Second, when the woman's husband acquires wealth by hard labor at art, trade, or farming, she tries to steal it, even if he earns but little. A wife like this is called a wife and a thief. The lazy glutton, unwilling to work, harsh, fierce, and rough in speech, a woman who dominates her own supporters, a wife like this is called a wife and a tyrant. Fourth, one always compassionate and sympathetic, who guards her husband as a mother would her son, who protects the wealth he earns. A wife like this is called a wife and a mother. Fifth, she who holds her husband in the high regard as younger sister would her elder brother, careful to do tasks well, following her husband's will. A wife like this is called a wife and a sister. Sixth, one who rejoices when she sees her husband as if seeing a friend after a long absence, well-raised, virtuous, devoted to her husband. A wife like this is called a wife and a friend. 7. One who remains patient and calm when threatened with violence by the rod, who tolerates her husband with a mind free of hate, patient, accommodating to her husband's intention. A wife like this is called a wife and a helper. The types of wives here called a killer, a thief, and a tyrant: unwholesome, harsh, disrespectful, with the body's breakup, go to hell. But the types of wives here called sister, mother, friend, and a helper, firm in virtue, long restrained, with the body's breakup, go to heaven. A man, Sujata, might have these 7 kinds of wives. Now, which one are you? Beginning today, Venerable Sir, let the perfectly enlightened one consider me a wife who is like a helper.
Okay, thank you, Kushi. So here the Buddha is talking to a female who happens to be a wife because he's in this setting, but we could very easily apply this to all genders and all roles, whether it's talking to a husband who's married to a wife, or a husband who's with a husband, or a wife who's with a wife. We can see that these roles still apply, that we would like to be a good partner and a helpful partner, and this will promote the very best relationships in our life. So here the Buddha is explaining these 7 types of individuals that we could be in terms of a partner. He's explaining the killer, the thief, the tyrant, one like a mother, one like a sister, a friend, or like a helper. And what you can do is you can take a teaching like this and you can say, okay, the Buddha is basically explaining these 6 things, and here these first 3, you're not interested in being any of those, right? So you can look at these and say, okay, one with a hateful mind, lacking compassion, lusting for others, despising your partner, this is a killer, right? So even for people who bring you wealth and provide you gifts, this is like a killer. Okay, you're not interested in doing any of those things, right? A husband or wife or partner who acquires wealth through hard labor or craft, trade, or farming, and this other partner tries to steal it, even if the person earns a little bit. This is like a thief. You're not interested in that either. A lazy glutton, unwilling to work, harsh, fierce, rough in speech, a partner who dominates her supporters, people who are supporting you. You're not interested in being this type of person either. This would be a tyrant. But now the Buddha is explaining these other individuals, and these are individuals that you might decide to cultivate these particular qualities. One who's compassionate and sympathetic, guarding your partner like a mother would guard her son, protecting the wealth. This would be certain qualities that you might decide to cultivate in your relationships. She who holds her husband in high regard, meaning you respect this individual, that you treat this person like a sister would treat an older brother, careful to do task well, following your life partner's guidance, essentially, is what the Buddha is talking about here. One who rejoices when he sees your partner, seeing like you're seeing a friend after a long absence. Like this would be a good quality to have with your partner. And then the 7th one who remains patient or calm, even when threatened by violence, right? And who tolerates her husband. Not that you should be having a partner who threatens you with violence. This would be unwise to be with a partner like that. The Buddha is saying if you're threatened by violence from other people, that you can be remaining calm, right? It doesn't mean that you stay in that situation, but if somebody threatens you with violence, it's possible to remain calm, right? If someone's saying they're going to kill you, they're going to murder you, they're going to do this, that, or the other thing to you, no reason to get all upset and uncalm about that. Just go on with your day and move on. No need to get all shaken up by it. So the Buddha is explaining these various qualities, free from hate, patient, accommodating to the intentions. These are the various qualities that you would like to cultivate in the mind. So this particular wife that he's talking to says that she's going to be this helper, I think, right? Is that what she says? Yeah, the helper, number 7, one who remains patient and calm. This is quite a cute little story, right, of things that were going on during the lifetime of the Buddha. Do you guys have any questions on this particular teaching? 7 kinds of wives.
Does this chapter go on, and does Buddha tell her that she should not be a helper or something like that?
I haven't looked to see what he was talking about after this, but you surely could. That's what these references are in there for. So if you go to Google and you type in this right here, AN 7.63, it will bring this discourse up. And you might need to look at 7.64 because that's usually the continuation of this particular story, or there might just be some more after that. But I haven't looked this one up, so I'm not sure what's after this. And then sometimes when you look these up in Google, if you put in the reference, it could be like a part number in some manufacturing facility. So you might need to put this reference AN 7.63 and then put Buddhism at the end. And then that'll pull up the actual teaching from the Buddha. Yeah, you're welcome. Okay, so I'm not seeing any questions either here at the temple or online either. So what I'll do then is just thank you all for attending here at the temple, and those of you guys that are attending online, thank you for being interested in learning and practicing the teachings of the Buddha. Each Saturday I teach this course here, or this class here at the temple, and then I teach online as well, either live streaming from the temple. And then this evening at 9 p.m., I'll be live streaming from home this same class. So no matter where you are in the world, whether you're here in Thailand or you're somewhere else in the world, either 9 a.m. or 9 p.m. Thai time, you'll have this class of the Pali Canon and English study group. And we do 10 chapters a week like this, moving through the entire set of volumes from volume 2 to volume 13. And then on Sundays, we go through volume 1, chapter by chapter. I spend time just teaching you for like 20 or 30 minutes, and then I open up to questions. And then I teach for another 20 or 30 minutes, and then open up to questions. It's more of a traditional style of learning, where this is more like a study group like you see here. And then we have courses and retreats and things like this all throughout the year here at the temple, and we live stream them as well. So you guys are always welcome to attend any of those. You can get access to it through our website, buddhadailywisdom.com, and there you can access the books and audiobooks and podcasts and videos and all kinds of other resources as well. So thank you all for joining. We'll see you guys in one of these future classes. Have a lovely rest of your day. Sawadee khap, sawadee khap, sawadee khap.
Thank you again for watching. Enjoy your meditation. Look forward to seeing you online and answering any questions that you might have. Thank you so much.